Welcome to episode 53 of the Ikario podcast. In this conversation, Shane and I are talking to Ben Winter. Ben is an author, he's a speaker, he's an actor, and he is an improvist. In this conversation, we talk about team building and communication, how to improve your relationships both in a professional setting and a personal setting too. The conversation covers two main topics. The first topic is the role of expectations. Ben talks a lot about this in the conversation, where he mentions the role of expectations in our interpersonal relationships. Most of the time, if we have an issue with somebody, for example, an expectation has not been met. And he actually provides a pretty cool framework for how to understand this in a more practical sense. And the second topic is the role of improv and how becoming better at improvisation can actually improve your relationships and your communication. Shane and I both enjoyed this conversation a lot, and we are confident that you will too. And with that, let's get into the episode.
So Ben, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's see where to start. I think there's a couple of things we can talk about today. One of them being your book on expectations, and another one being your experience with improv. And I think I definitely want to get to both of those. But let's start with the book. So you published a book which is about expectations. It's called What to Expect When Having Expectations. And can you tell us, like, what led to this? What brought you to the point where, like, I need to write a book on this topic?
Well, it's funny because you mentioned the improv as well, and it really stems from actually teaching improv. You know, the company that I have is where I teach team building using improv. And every time that I would come to a specific rule that I would talk about, which is called Be Specific, oddly enough, is all around setting expectations. And as I was teaching it, I kept saying the same thing over and over, which is that the only reason anyone gets upset is because an expectation hasn't been met. And it's like, okay, this is cool. It seems to hold true, but it doesn't solve any problems, right? Mm-hmm. And so I sat down with it one day and just sort of started kind of mapping out this point in time when you're upset and trying to figure out, you know, what do I do with this, and how do I take somebody from being upset to being at peace? And I started working on this flow chart, which I'm sure we'll talk about several times, but really got to this point where I was like, this is cool. This flowchart works. It takes people from those moments and times of being upset, walks them through like what's happening with their expectations. But I kept finding every time I would answer a question, no, like, have you shared your expectation? No, I haven't shared my expectation. You know, like, why would people not share their expectations? What's going on there? And there's a lot of depth behind every no in that workflow. So I was like, all right, I need to write this book. So that was kind of the natural progression. It was from teaching improv, oddly enough.
So yeah, it's interesting. So something that came to mind, you were saying, okay, because it makes sense, right? Why are we upset? Well, we had some expectation. We probably didn't tell anyone about it. And then the expectation wasn't met and now we're sad, right? Well, one thing that reminds me of is like the Buddhist idea of your suffering comes from your desire. The problem is you want all these things, and when you have them, you find something else to want, and so you're perpetually dissatisfied. So what do you make of that? Do you see a parallel there, or is that taking it too far?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm not teaching anything new here. I'm just putting it in different words. So there's lots of parallels to a lot of different people out there and a lot of great teachers in the past. And you know, all I'm kind of doing is bringing it into like today's terms. People understand expectations are a thing, and if people can understand, like, hey, I'm upset. You know, the other side of being upset is I had an expectation, and most of the time we don't even realize we had that expectation until it's going unmet. Prime examples that I always tell people is, you know, when you wake up in the morning, you expect the electricity to be working. You expect your food in the refrigerator to still be cold. Right? We don't think about those expectations that we have until we wake up to no electricity, or that our food is now warm and we have to throw it all away. Right? We don't experience those expectations as a thing until they're going unmet. And so that even deeper things like how life is supposed to work, how relationships are supposed to work, how work is supposed to work, right? We don't understand that we have these expectations until they're staring us in the face.
I really like the example of electricity, because it also shows how we just get used to anything, right? And because it's actually kind of a miracle that you get up in the morning and you have access to fresh food, and you never had to worry about, oh, how do I conserve this food or whatever. No, it just works for us. But it becomes a totally implicit expectation, and it's true, it's totally upsetting when the fridge isn't working, even though it's actually such a privilege to have a working fridge, right?
Yeah, it's the expectation thing. So this reminds me of there's a clip from one of my favorite comedians where he's talking about this. He's talking about this dude on a plane. So he gets on this plane. There's a guy sat next to him, and then he finds out, the comedian, wow, we can get Wi-Fi on the flight. It's like, this is amazing. So they're enjoying Wi-Fi for the first 20 minutes of the flight. They're like 30,000 feet in the air. It's like, whoa, he's loving it. He's on YouTube and stuff. And then all of a sudden the Wi-Fi goes down. And this dude sat next to him just goes, this is fucking bullshit. It's like, and he goes, how did the world owe you something that you didn't even know existed 20 minutes ago?
Right, so exactly.
So in that example, that guy very quickly developed, rapidly, an expectation that this has been given to me now, therefore this should work now that you've given it me. And then it's just it's an example of an expectation kind of not matching fully the reality of the situation almost.
Yeah, and it's kind of an unrealistic expectation to some extent, because here you are at 30,000 feet in the air traveling some insane speed, and you expect the Wi-Fi to continually work the entire time. We're not quite there yet, people. Calm down. Still some bugs to sort out in that system.
Yeah.
So lots of stuff comes to mind that I want to ask you about. But first, before we get ahead of ourselves, you mentioned this flow chart essentially that I guess. Mm-hmm. Does it start with being upset and then you work backwards? Is that how it works? Or does it start with an expectation?
Yeah. No, that's exactly where it starts. And the reason I did that is because if we all understand that the moment in time that we're upset, we have an opportunity to do something different, an opportunity for growth, that is a huge first step, because awareness is the number one thing when it comes to personal growth and actually having more and better in our lives. So if you can remember, I'm upset, I have a choice. That's a great starting point. That your life will change just knowing that alone. And so the workflow starts there if you're upset. And so the first question I ask, though, on that flow chart is, did you know you had the expectation? And a lot of times the answer is no, I didn't even know I had this expectation. So right there, you can kind of bring yourself back and explore, what is this expectation? Where did it come from? Is it something I learned when I was a kid? Is it, I have Wi-Fi at home and I expect it to work 24/7. So now that I'm on a plane, I expect it to work, right? Where did this expectation come from? And so that's kind of the first step after being upset is asking that question. And sometimes we do know that we had the expectation, and so we can progress from there and start asking the other questions. Have we shared that expectation? Is it reasonable? And so on. So and reasonable expectations is a big one in that whole flow chart, because my big issue that I always get upset with is traffic. And it is completely unreasonable for me to have expectations that everybody knows how to drive the same way. It just has proven itself impossible. And I can't have a conversation with everybody that's out on the road. And even then, we're not all going to agree on how it's supposed to work. So it's a completely unreasonable expectation. And because I've done all this work, instead of being upset the entire time I'm driving, I'm upset for 5 or 10 seconds at a time. So it's much better.
So there's also an awareness aspect to this, or I guess you can train yourself to realize, oh, I'm upset. And instead of, because I guess what we usually do when we're upset is we stew in our negative emotions, right?
Hmm.
We wallow a little bit, maybe, and instead we can say, well, I'm going to kick off this process where I'm going to ask myself a series of questions to. It's like an alternative choice, right? This is the other thing I can choose to do when I'm upset.
Exactly. And you kind of hit on it, where people will get upset and they'll stay upset for a very long period of time. I mean, how many stories have we heard where like a child and a parent haven't talked or in decades because they were
Mm.
upset about something that happened 20 years ago, and now they're not even talking? Or, siblings that get in a fight and then they just don't talk to each other. Whereas had they just had a small conversation, they probably weren't even upset about the same thing at the same time. And
Mm.
so it was absolutely stupid. Um, but yeah, this really just kind of comes in of, hey, you have a choice. As long as you remember you have a choice, things are going to be better for you.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. So let's. So all of this came out of improv for you.
Mm-hmm.
You were mentioning that you do improv to essentially. Are you teaching people teamwork? Is that how it works? Or can you tell us more about your improv work?
Yeah, so it's primarily for team building, but it helps with communication, with conflict resolution, just general happiness in the workplace. And what it comes down to is, if you think of our lives on a daily basis, what do? We improvise. We don't wake up with a script. There's nothing telling us how our day is going to go. We are just improvising every moment of every day of our lives. Now, when I first took my first improv class, I was kind of freaking out. I'm like, I don't know how to do this stuff. Like, I'm not good enough for this. And the first thing the guy talked about was the rules of improv. And if you follow the rules of improv, you'll be fine. Everything will work out great. I was like, there are rules to improv, right? It seemed opposite of what it should have been. But he went over the rules, and they're so foundational in how life works that once you understand them, everything just works easier and better and more smoothly. And for me, I have much more joy in my life because I find the humor in so many things that normally I wouldn't. The most common improv rule that people hear is yes and. You ask anybody, have you ever heard of an improv rule? And they're like, yes and. It's like,
Yeah,
yes,
it's the
that
only
is a
one I
very
know.
common. Yeah, it's typically the only one people know, which is fine. It's a great one. It kind of goes to, yes, you're upset and you have a choice, right? It's that simple. It's accepting what is and going forward from there. And that's the beauty of it, because like on stage, if you're watching stage improv, if two people walk out on stage and one says, hi, mom, how are you? The other person now has to agree, yes, I'm mom, and I have to do something to add to this scene so that people want to keep watching it. Whereas if the second person walked out and said, I'm not your mom, I'm your brother, what are you talking about? Right? Now nobody's having fun. The other actor's thrown off. The audience is like, what's happening? Right? How many times do we go out in public and we're talking to somebody and they completely deny the fact that they just hit your car with a buggy, right? You're in the parking lot, they hit your car with a buggy, and they completely deny that it just happened, rather than saying, oh, my bad, I'm sorry, got away from me, whatever it might be. Problem solved. But no, they're just going to put up a fight saying, no, I'm right, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. So, that's the world we're living in today. You're wrong, no, you're wrong, no, you're wrong, no, you're wrong. And it's clear as day in politics that nobody's saying yes and, they're all saying no but.
Yeah.
And it's just
Yeah,
nobody's
we're
getting
definitely
anywhere.
not. Yeah, we're definitely not living in a yes and world. Yeah, to frame it
Exactly.
like that.
And it's frustrating when you start seeing all these no buts flying everywhere instead of a yes and. Like, okay, I see what you're saying, and do you see what I'm saying? And can we come to an agreement? And can we come to some understanding of what the objective result is? Because until we decide what the end result is, there's no reason to even start this conversation. Because you might be talking about that over there, and I'm talking about this over here. And we're not going to solve anything talking about two different things. And
Yeah, yeah.
so,
And
yes, and is very, very important.
yeah, yeah. And there's no incentive in our conversations to come to a consensus, right? To come to an agreement, because you get the attention, you get the clicks, you get like everything is driven towards a conflict and outrage and all this kind of stuff, right? And I think that's also true, in politics. I don't think you score points for like trying to find agreement with your political enemies, right? If anything, you score points for like dunking on them. And so, yeah, it's an interesting perspective on this. Yeah, we're really doing the opposite of yes and everywhere we look.
And
I'm also
it's funny
curious,
because
though. Yeah, go ahead.
well, just really quick, like in media today, all TV shows and movies, right? You see the conflict at the beginning, and had they just sat down for 10 seconds, problem resolved, movie's over, done, right? But obviously, you wouldn't have good TV or movies that would last long enough if you didn't have that conflict, that no but kind of happening, if you will. And so that's what we're subjected to all the time. If you watch TV, you're subjected to the crazy and the conflict that we shouldn't be having in life. Like that is not reality, people. That is entertainment. So get over it.
Most TV shows would be over in minutes if they went with the whole yes and thing. Imagine if everyone communicated really well.
Yeah, it'd be. That was a really short show. Awesome. Okay.
It's a very short show. Oh, we can't watch TV anymore. Let's go do something else.
Might be good for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have an expectation for people to behave better and communicate better. That's why I'm upset. Anyway,
yeah, it's unreasonable, by the way. I've explored that one a lot.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'm also curious about the other rules that we don't know about clearly, right? Can you tell us more about the other rules of improv?
So the first rule I always teach is called don't deny. And don't deny and the yes and yes and are basically the same thing. But the reason that I separate them is because there's a lot to explore in simply accepting what is in the moment. Because a lot of people, whatever's happening, they skip right past accepting that that's what's happening, and they try to solve it or deny it or whatever it might be. So back to the stage, hi mom, how are you? The first thing the other person has to do is accept. This person just came out and said, hi mom. I am now mom because there's nobody else on stage. So it doesn't matter what I came out thinking I needed or wanted to do. I have to forget and go with being mom for this particular scene. Anybody who's dealing with addiction, number one step is accepting I'm addicted. I have an addiction. I have to accept that that's what's going on before I'm willing to get any help. You can't help somebody with an addiction unless they're willing to admit that they have the addiction. That's the number one thing. If you don't have the relationship you want, if you don't have the money that you want, you have to accept that's where I am. That's what's going on. Before you can do anything else. So don't deny is really about accepting what is. And it's hard for some people to accept what is. It's sometimes hard for me to accept what's going on. And the more that we can accept what's going on, the more we can do something about it. So that's why I always split out don't deny and yes and. Because you really have to come to grips with acceptance before you can do anything else. But then the second rule is the yes and, where we dive deeper into, okay, now you've accepted it and you have to do something else. And it's not accept it but do something else, because the word but negates anything that happens before it. I always love the example of I love you, but you're crazy. You just kind of like ignored the I love you part and just went with crazy. I love you and you're crazy, right? You still love the person and they're crazy, but it's a little bit more positive. Like you might actually get somewhere with the and in there. And the other person receives it a little bit better. Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of what that is. And I alluded to the third rule, which is be specific, because that one's about setting expectations. And in I think it's in my expectations, but it's in one of my books. But I do kind of an example of like, hey, honey, take out the trash, right? If you've been in a relationship, you live together, like that's been a request one way or the other, either direction. But that doesn't give enough specifics, like which trash, when do you need it taken out? Like, is it all the trash? Is it the kitchen trash? Like what's going on? there's not a lot of specifics in that request. And maybe the other person is doing something else that they want to be doing at the very moment, and so they'll get to it later, but the other person had the expectation of them doing it now, but they didn't share that. So it's really about setting those expectations and communication and saying like, hey, you need to do this now because it's really smelly and we have friends coming over in an hour. Like, there's no time to wait. And so that's a very important thing. And then the fourth rule I talk about, focus on the present. If you are talking to somebody, like right now we're having this interview, this dialogue, and if I was thinking about, okay, after this meeting I have to go to the store, I have to do laundry, I have that thing, I have that project I have to work on, I have all these thoughts about what I'm doing in the future. You guys might ask a question and I'll be like, what? Repeat that? Like, and it creates a bad interview. You're talking to a friend and they're sitting there on their phone. What? What? Oh, what? Yeah. It's no fun. You don't want to have that conversation. I find myself when I'm talking to a friend and we're going out to dinner or whatever, if they get on their phone, I just shut my mouth. I just wait until they're done before I continue with the conversation. I don't take offense to it because it's kind of the society that we're living in today. Like, I could easily take offense to it. But depending on the person, I know that they work 24 hours a day. So I'm like, oh, they're just taking a work email or something. So I don't think twice about it. I just wait. Now, eventually they're going to pick up on like, Ben doesn't talk to me when I'm on my phone, and he just sort of sits there and stares at me. So maybe I should put my phone on silent, that sort of thing. But I'm pretty forgiving in that area. But focus on the present is huge, 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 huge for communication. When you actually hear what the words that are coming out of somebody's mouth, you can respond accordingly. And it's very important for communication because you might miss that one word that changes everything.
Yeah, so it's interesting how with improv you have to be like on the edge of the present moment because there's no plan. And yeah, thinking about it, again, like so many of the things you're talking about really remind me of Buddhist teachings, essentially about non-resistance and being in the present and so on. So yeah, this makes me really curious.
I'm not teaching anything new, just in a different way. And that's the thing. Anybody teaching personal growth, Tony Robbins included, big names down, everybody's teaching the same thing. They're just doing it in a different way. So
as I dare say I agree with that. And even though Shane, you see parallels with Buddhist teachings in what Ben's saying, I see how you mentioned, Ben, the things that you said about the rules of improv. I couldn't help but sort of associate that with like normal social situations, but specifically like dating situations, right? And it just made me think of some ridiculous situation where I did not really adhere to any of those rules, and this happened like a few months ago. So in my mind, I saw this woman walk in, and in my mind, I thought, oh my God, she's beautiful. So I'm just going to go over, give her a compliment, and then walk away. That's the plan I had in my mind, right? Well, that plan really fucked me over because it means that I wasn't in contact with the present moment at all. So I went over to her, I said, hey, I think you're really nice looking. I just thought I'd tell you. And she goes, oh, really? And I was like, yeah. And she goes, well, okay, well, I'm leaving tomorrow, but do you want to grab a drink? Now, I couldn't adapt to that present moment in time. So I just said, oh, no, I just want to give you a compliment. It's fine. And then I walk away and she walks away all sort of like, what? And then I just stop and she's in the distance. I was like, it's too late now. And I thought, I'm such an ass. What did I just do? Like, why did I was clinging to my plan so much that I just couldn't adapt. So basically,
she was like, let's get a drink. And your response was, no, but.
No. So my plan does not include drinks. Come on. I was ready for rejection. Okay.
Exactly. I was prepped for that. That was my plan, but yeah, it should have been a yes and an acceptance of the present moment. So basically, I should start taking improv classes. That's what I'm learning.
The funny thing is, people think, oh, you got to be really quick on your feet and everything else with improv. I have found that you literally just have to turn your brain off. Like, don't even think about the next step. You just go with what's there at the moment, and Shane, you were talking about the Buddhists, like letting go, or I don't remember the words that you used, but it was like you literally just let go of any thought about what's happening next, because that's where the focus on the present really comes in. Because yeah, you could start with your original plan, but as soon as something changes, you have to let go of that plan. You have to let go of the thought. Like the two people walking in on stage. Hi, Mom, how are you? The other person may have had a plan to come in with something completely different. Like, like, let's go to the fair today, right? Completely different things going on. But if they came out just, I'm ready to let go of whatever I had in mind because they spoke first, then it's easy to adapt. And that's where just turning your brain off works so well. And so many people, when we're worried about the future, when we think we know what's going to happen, we're not turning our brain off. We're almost expecting something else to happen that's probably not going to. Everything that I've ever worried about in the future has never come true. Like in all the years of my life, I've never been right about what's going to happen in the future. When I worry about things, I'll just put it that way. Sometimes I've been right about like, oh yeah, I'm going to meet this person at this time. And yeah, I meet them, whatever. So, so next time you tell a girl, turn your brain off.
That's a great point. Like that's another good point. I mean, it's something I often notice. So when I used to like the few job interviews I've had in my life, I used to be very nervous about them. And I would notice, and it took me a few job interviews to notice that my mind would come up with a very elaborate scenario that was intimidating, right? And it was very detailed as well. It was a very rich scenario. Like I even pictured the people interviewing me, but I've never met them before. But my mind thought that it knew what they would look like and how they'd respond to me and stuff. And never once did that situation go down how my mind predicted it would. Never. But for some reason, it's still convincing in the future. It still like seems to just pull you in to thinking that, yeah, this is how it's going to go down, even though it's never been right in the history of its whole, 90% of the time your mind's wrong. But this time it might be right, It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, my big example has always been text messages. Like, why aren't they texting back? Like, what's going on, right? I will come up with 1,000 reasons why they're not texting me back, and I've never been right. And it's always the strangest thing that I never would have thought of. I'm like, okay. So now I'm just like, they drop their phone on the toilet, they'll get back to me when they get it fixed, right? I have to let it go. And yeah, it's insane what we will make up.
Yeah, exactly. It's generally more of a problem of overthinking, and maybe it's also I'm sure there are different types, but I 100% identify as an overthinker, and I think I would struggle with improv. I mean, after talking to you, I feel like I need to try it out just to, just for like the comfort zone leaving experience of it. I'm pretty sure I'd be very uncomfortable because I'm a terrible overthinker, and as you were saying, that you have to let go of your plan. So if someone comes in and says, "Hi, Mom, I'm home," or whatever, then on the one hand, whoever else is on stage has to let go of whatever they wanted to do. But even the person who came in and set the scene with "Hi, Mom," they have to let go immediately as well, because they're not going to get the response they thought they were going to get, most likely.
Exactly.
Right? So it's like you just have to continually let go of whatever you were expecting.
Yeah. I mean, when I take that scenario a little further, it's like, "Hi, Mom, how are you?" And the other person accepts Mom. They're like, "Don't hi, Mom me. You spilled paint in the garage." Right? This first person had no idea that paint was spilled in the garage until just then and there. But now you know where this scene is going to go. It's like, Mom is upset. I spilled paint in the garage, which means I was doing something in the garage. Like, they have something to build with and play with now. The scene is set just after those few lines. Actually, after just 2 lines, the scene is set. But until then, and even still, as you said, every time a new line of dialogue is created, you have to let go of what you think is going to be said next. And that's the beauty of improv on stage. It's not that everybody's quick on their feet. It's that they've learned to just turn their brain off and just listen and then respond accordingly to what was said.
I'd love to know more about when you do this with, with people you work with for team building purposes. Can you tell us a bit about what are like mistakes or points of resistance that people come in? And can you tell us about how doing or how practicing improv helps them solve those problems? So basically what I'm asking is like, what kind of problem do you often see that is resolved with giving people the practice of improv?
So the biggest thing is really understanding that it's not just you. There are other people around you. The big thing with like expectations is we have an expectation of somebody else, but they also have an expectation of you and the situation. And so until you both share those expectations with one another, you have no idea what the other person's thinking. And even then, they're not necessarily going to buy into your expectation and vice versa. So you actually have to do this thing. It's new. I'm telling you, nobody's used to this thing. It's cool. It's called communication. You guys have to actually talk. I know it's a big word. Nobody knows how to do it anymore, but it's a lost art. But you actually have to communicate and come together and come to an agreement. It's like it's this word negotiation, right? You got to negotiate. And once you're both on the same page and you can negotiate on something, then you know truly what the expectation is of one another, and you've both bought into an outcome. And therefore, it's most likely going to happen. If it doesn't, then there's probably some other expectation that's hidden that's not understood yet. And, it's nested. There's so many expectations nested with one another. It's ridiculous. All you can do is really take them one at a time. But that's kind of what I hope to get out of it, is that when you're sitting in the office with your teammate and you don't agree with them or you don't understand what's going on with them, you really have to take that step back and talk to them and ask them questions and get on the same page. If you want a raise, you have to go to your boss and say, hey, I want a raise. What do I need to do to get that? Now the boss knows your expectation is to get a raise, but then they have to share their expectations of what they want from you to get that raise. Now, again, what you're doing is communicating. But now, like if you just want a raise and you just continually go time after time after time of not getting a raise, now you're upset because you're not getting the raise. But did you share it? Did you talk to anybody? No. So it's completely unreasonable to expect a raise when you haven't even told anybody you want one. Now, we all get it. You work for somebody, you always expect a raise. Everybody always expects a raise. They always want a raise. It's never somebody saying, no, I don't want a raise. What are you kidding? Right? Nobody's going to say that.
Don't you dare give me more money.
Yeah. Put me in some new tax bracket. Screw that. No. People want a raise. Let's just be honest. So, but until you share it, you're not going to understand what you need to do to get that raise. And so that's kind of one of those real world scenarios there. Or, your boss wants you to work on this project, but they don't understand you're working on 5 other projects. And now you have to have this conversation of which one takes precedence. It just opens that door to communication. And when everybody's communicating more effectively, isn't it just a little easier to go to work? A little bit more fun, like, that sort of thing. And, what I do with everyone is I do a bunch of exercises with them to demonstrate these rules. And a lot of time they realize it's easier than they thought it was. A lot of people are like thinking too far ahead or thinking too much about it, or they're making it more difficult than they need to. And that's all that I attempt to demonstrate is like, it's not difficult. It's just you're not used to it. We're not used to sharing our expectations with other people.
Yeah. It sounds like part of the problem is also that we don't have practice, because if you simply sit someone down and say, well, can you communicate clearly about your expectations and so on? It's like, well, I'm not sure I know how. So it's not always that I simply, like, I know what my expectations are, I know what's going on, and I'm just not telling anyone. But it's also like, how aware are you actually of what's going on? How aware are you of being able to, because like you said, one of the rules is about being specific. And in order to be fully specific, we have to actually be able to bring all of our expectations into awareness, which isn't a given, right? So I guess it's a matter of practice too, to some extent.
Yeah. And, I talked about the workflow, and, I obviously know it in and out because I created it. It's around me all the time. So when I get upset, I'm able to easily switch and really understand what's going on because I practice it on a regular basis, which is why I said, instead of being upset the entire time I'm driving somewhere, it's 5 or 10 seconds because I've been practicing over and over and over. And I still catch myself having expectations of other people and not sharing them. And, I'm able to have that quick conversation of, Ben, you're not sharing that expectation, so you can't be upset with them. They have no idea. So I'm able to calm myself down more and more. And then, then I can have that conversation of, Ben, I expected you to share your expectations. Why are you not sharing your expectations? And right. So now I'm having these internal conversations, but I'm aware of them so I can actually do something about it. And it's pretty freeing after a while, but it does take practice. I'm going to tell everyone right now, there's no magic bullet when it comes to personal growth. You got to practice. I don't care if you're learning from me, from Tony Robbins, from Buddhism. You have to practice. It's just a thing. You can't just, oh, I read this book, now I'm cured, and I'm like, cured of what?
Yeah. I wonder if that's ever happened in the history of people at any point. Like, I'd be interested to have someone on the podcast who can honestly say that I read this book and then I was fixed in some area. That'd be hilarious. Also, there's something about the expectations, because I often wonder why is it that people don't share things that are important, and I wonder if it's in some part because of their assumptions they're making. Like, because you got your expectations, what holds you back from sharing your expectations? Probably assumptions, which is like how you think it's going to go down. And this is why I love what you talked about earlier, Ben, with regards to improv and sort of letting go of how, like in the same way you'd do some improv, you have to let go of how you think something's going to go down, or your preconceptions. And in this case, I'm saying your assumptions. It's like, well, if I share my expectation with someone, then they'll be upset, or they'll just say no immediately, or some other negative result. And it's like, in order to do this, it would seem that you've got an assumption about how that's going to go down. Why don't you, like, are you aware of the assumption? No, okay, become aware of the assumption, let it go, share the expectation. Because that's how it seems to me, is that people just assume too much and then attach to the assumptions they make.
Yeah, and the easiest way to sum that up is with the word fear. There's a fear of sharing that expectation, because what if they don't like it? Maybe they're going to run away. Like, if you're in a relationship and you like to do a certain thing in the bedroom, but you're not sure they do, there's a fear around sharing it, because what if now they break up with you because they think you're a freak, right? But what if they're totally into it and now your sexual relationship just got better? There's the flip side of that fear of freedom. And I use sex a lot because that's one of the big ones that people like to do things that are maybe taboo or something. I don't think there's that much that's taboo anymore. I mean, with the freedom this world is living in, but we're so afraid to share those desires, those fantasies with our partner, the person that we're the closest with, right? Shouldn't they be the first person we share that fantasy with, rather than try and go find it somewhere else, right? But we do have a fear. We have a fear of people abandoning us, of leaving us, and some of that stems from our childhood, where we have a friend, we tell them something, and they turn on us, right? Because kids are mean, kids are stupid, they don't get it. But now we have that experience of, if I share something vulnerable with a friend of mine and they turn on me, why would I share anything vulnerable with anybody else? Because they're going to turn on me, right? So a lot of that fear stems from our youth.
Yeah, and that then also comes back to, like, now we have the assumption, oh, someone else is going to behave. It's like, I think you're going to behave like that, but that's an assumption. You're not the person, right? You're not the person who abandoned me after I confided in you or whatever. But I'm just coming in with that assumption and essentially not testing my theory in a way, right? Yeah. So I also see after, go ahead.
I was gonna say, sometimes it's one person that abandons you or kind of messes with that confidence. And you can kind of shake that off. But if it happens 2 or 3 times, then you're like, yeah, people suck. I'm never going to tell anybody anything. So
yeah, and after you explained this, I also see how the dots connect essentially, because like through this process of catching yourself when you're upset and asking yourself a series of questions to get to the bottom of what was I expecting, that gives you that practice, that gives you the clarity with which you can then clearly communicate with people. So I'm seeing how this all comes together.
yeah.
So yeah, I think that's, and it's a really interesting perspective. I'm really glad that we got you on, because I've never heard anyone like frame it like this, and I think it's a really practical approach. So let me ask you, where can people learn more from you? Where should we send people if they want to get your book or just learn more from your experience with improv and all this?
Absolutely. So there's 2 websites that I would have people go to. The first one is havingexpectations.com, and that's more about the expectations book. And you can get the flow chart that we've been talking about. You can just download that for free, put it on your fridge, put it in your office, wherever you're going to see it, and remind yourself, like, I have a choice when I'm upset. And then the other website would be successimprov.com, and that's the company that I have where I teach improv and stuff like that.
Awesome. And if you're listening to this, make sure you check out one of Ben's many books that he's written. I'm looking at your website now, and we've got a whole library in here. So
well, and if you looked at my wall over here, I have like 5 or 6 more books that I want to write. So. But they're on hold because I'm writing. Yeah, I'm writing my first sci-fi novel right now, so that's kind of fun too.
Oh, nice, very nice.
Yeah, and I'm gonna tell everyone. Somebody told me once that writing fiction is like doing improv. It's like writing improv. I was like, oh, that made it easy. So it almost gave me the permission to move forward with it, because it's like I didn't have to have the entire book figured out and then start writing it, because man, this book is taking turns I didn't even expect it to take. So it's kind of been fun.
Oh, nice.
So if you have an idea for writing a book, just do it. Start writing down your ideas. Just make it happen. Don't make it hard.
There we go.
Right. Well, that's awesome. Thank you very much, Ben. Of course, we will also put the links to everything you mentioned in the show notes, including the links where you can get this flow chart, which is really cool that we can actually get this and practice this. So yeah, thank you very much for coming on and sharing this with us, Ben. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Appreciate it, Ben. Thanks, man. Take care.